again, race and gender neutral recommendations, and there were enhanced race and gender conscious initiatives. So basically the 2020 study expanded upon our race and gender neutral recommendations and implementations, and also provided more enhanced MBE, WBE, which are race and gender conscious initiatives. In January of this year, 2021, as a result of the 2020 recommendations, County Executive Bootish issued 4 executive orders that align with the 8 recommendations from the 2020 disparity study. As a result of the disparity study, the 2021 equity report from the Internal Equity Commission, and also some of the recommendations that came out of the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity and best practice nationally, we modified our SBE, MBE, WBE program, submitted those recommendations to County Council for updates to those programs for review and approval by County Council. Those County Council approved those recommendations on November 9th. And as such, we are proceeding with trainings to both vendors, and that includes vendors that are county certified MBEs, WBEs, and SBEs, and also non-SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs, because the program's changes impact the entire procurement process. In addition, we're going to do training for county procurement staff on those changes to the programs. Those trainings will occur the week of November 29th, and also the week of December 6th. Today's training is the training to both vendors that are certified and those that are not SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs. A brief overview of the proposed changes that will be presented today are detailed here. And they are provided just for our overview. We're going to talk about our outreach. We're going to talk about the enhanced posting and our forecast. We're going to talk about the changes specifically to the program as it relates to our informal bidding process, our SBE set-aside program, and how we set goals. The focus today will be on the vendor's perspective on how you interact with the county's procurement process as it relates to these changes. However, the content will provide insight into all sides of the procurement process. As a result of the improvements to the SBE, MBE programs, one significant change is that for both the SBE certification and the MBE, WBE certifications, the certification period will be expanded from 1 year to 2 years. For the SBE program, it still is a requirement that you must meet the annual gross revenues limits and or workforce limits of the Small Business Administration's guidelines. For the MBE, WBE program, in order to become certified as a county certified MBE, you must be 51% owned by one or more individuals who are African American, Hispanic American, Native American, Asian Pacific American, or Asian Indian American. And they must have, again, 51%. For the WBE program, the business must be at least 51% owned by one or more individuals who are women. And again, they must have operational managerial control. For both the MBE and WBE program, the geographic limits include Cuyahoga County, Geauga County, Lake County, Lorain County, and Medina County. The geographic limits for the MBE and WBE program are based on the data from the 2020 disparity study, which looks at our economic market, the market that we operate in statistically over the period that for the 2020 disparity study. And that was determined to be the Cleveland, Elyria, MSA. So again, those are the counties that are in the Cleveland, Elyria, MSA. In addition, for both SBE, MBE, and WBE, not only do we need to know the ownership, but we need to make sure that that ownership has operational control and managerial control of the business. In addition to SBE, MBE, and WBE certifications, the county has a CCBB certification. A business applying to be known as a Cuyahoga County-based business must demonstrate that it has a principal place of business located in Cuyahoga County for at least 3 years. The business must be of significant economic presence in Cuyahoga County. And that is determined by at least for 3 years having had a sales office, division, sales outlet, or manufacturing facility in Cuyahoga County, pays the required taxes to Cuyahoga County, and has an annual gross payroll in Cuyahoga County of at least $100,000. Cuyahoga County also has a CCBEIP, which is the Economic Inclusive Business. To meet that certification, the business must demonstrate that they have used a minority business enterprise or women business enterprise in at least 3 projects within the past 2 years. Or the business must demonstrate that it hired and employed a diverse workforce based on payroll records within the past 2 years. Those applications are available on the county's website. The link is listed above. Again, the program, the webinar is going to be posted on YouTube, so you can pause here and get the link. However, the simplest way to find the applications would be to go to the Cuyahoga County website, do an A to Z search, look for the Department of Equity and Inclusion, and under our services tab, you will have the option to pick diversity certifications. When you pick diversity certifications, it'll bring you to this page, and applications for all of the programs I just mentioned are available for download. SBE, MBE, WBE, the CCBB, and the CCBEIP. One of the improvements with the program is that we are now where we make all reasonable efforts that formal bids, RFPs and RFQs for the county will be posted for a 30-day minimum. Again, our goal is to increase the diversity of our vendor pool and also to increase the competitive nature of our procurements. We want to make sure that we have a diverse pool that's able to compete for county business opportunities. So again, instead of for informal RFPs, the prior requirement was 15 days. That is being expanded to 30 days. And for RFPs and RFQs, the prior typical minimum was 22 days. That's being expanded to 30 days. The effort or an intent of that extension of the posting period is that it will provide businesses that are not normally participating in our procurement process to have a longer time to develop competent responses to the proposals. Vendors that are used to dealing with our process and understand our proposals, understand our usual content requirements and our process are already familiar with the 15 days and 30 days, but this expands it so that people who are in businesses that are not familiar have a longer, they all have a long time, but it provides a better opportunity for them to feel comfortable about submitting a response to our RFBs, RFPs, and RFQs. Where and how do you find the notices? Again, the procurement notices are available on the county's website. If you go to the website listed, opd.cuyahogacounty.us, under services, there's the, on the homepage for that department is the listing of notices. You can put in a search by date. You can put in a search by agency if you're aware of that. Or if you found the information from a legal notice and it mentioned the requisition number, then you can do a search by the requisition number. So the easiest search is always the date. If you noted that, for instance, that is available now, then you can pick, for instance, November 1st and through to November 30th to see all the items that were posted during that time period. In addition, there's other general information on that same page regarding Cuyahoga County's purchasing process. Please visit so you can become familiar with county's purchasing process and what types of procurement are available. In addition to extending the 30-day posting, which is the actual time period during which that RFB, RFP, or RFQ will be available for submission of proposals, and that's for formal bids and RFPs and RFQs are for procurements that are estimated to cost at more than $50,000. In addition to that, we want to expand awareness about the county's upcoming procurement process by preparing and posting a forecast of our purchasing for the upcoming 24-month period. The forecast will be updated semi-annually. So the first forecast was posted by July 1st of this year. We are in the current process of updating that forecast so that it is ready for posting by January 1st of this year. Again, if you want to find out information about the procurement process in general, make sure you go to the county's purchasing website, which ones I just showed you on the previous two slides. And it's also the system that the county uses for our strategic sourcing as part of our overall ERP system is the Infor system. And if you're a vendor, you should get registered in the Infor supplier portal so that you can register as a company. You'll indicate by selecting the NIGP codes, which stands for National Institute of Government Purchasing, which categorizes purchasing products and goods and services into 5-digit codes. You'll register as a company in the Infor supply portal, indicating the goods and services that your business provides or offer for others. And that will, when the county makes purchases under those commodity codes, you can be notified about those opportunities to provide a response or bid for those goods and services. The forecast is an Excel spreadsheet, and it has overarching or broad information about each procurement. It'll provide details on the primary and department specific. Primary and department specific relates to those agencies that have a very large department, but it has a lot of divisions or smaller departments. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, the Department of Equity and Inclusion is part of the fiscal office. So the primary department for the Department of Equity and Inclusion would be the fiscal office, and the department more specific would be the Department of Equity and Inclusion. This also relates to departments like the Health and Human Services Department. So that would be the primary department, but Health and Human Services, also known as HHS, has several smaller departments, such as Department of Children and Family Services, Senior and Adult Services, and those would be the departments more specific. The forecast will also provide a brief description of the summary of the goods and services being purchased. It'll provide the range of the cost range for the goods and services being procured. It'll provide the anticipated solicitation period by quarter. For instance, with the update that's coming out in January 1st, it'll have goods and services for the 2022 year and for the 2023 year. And the anticipated solicitation period will provide the quarter of that year for each particular of those 2 years for each particular procurement that we're looking to buy. It'll also provide the procurement method. Is it going to be a RFB, request for bids, or if it's going to be a RFP, request for proposals, or RFQ for request for qualifications? It'll also provide the informal RFB, RFPs, and RFQs, which is basically a purchase less than $50,000, but with that pertinent procurement method. In addition, we're looking to expand the small business set-aside program, and we're expanding that by looking at the planned procurements for the next 24-month period and determine which ones are good candidates for the small business set-aside program. The small business set-aside program is a program that was initiated as part of the 2014 disparity study. And as part of that program, for certain procurements, small businesses compete against each other for the award. As part of the 2014 program, that was the pilot department was the Department of Public Works. And for various reasons, it remained that SBE set-asides were analyzed or picked from Department of Public Works procurement. One of the recommendations from the 2020 disparity study was to expand the small business set-aside program to other departments. So how we're doing that is looking at what departments are planning to buy over the next 24-month period and determine if some of those procurements are good candidates for the small business set-aside program. Okay, so now that you know what we're going to buy for the next 24-month period, what should you do? We recommend that you download the spreadsheet. It's just a simple Excel spreadsheet with the fields I just listed. Review, sort, and filter the information to determine opportunities to match the goods and services your business provides. So now that'll let you know you can filter and start tracking the items that you feel are good matches for the goods and services that you provide. You also want to make sure that you register in the Enforced Supplier portal to make sure that you'll receive specific notifications when those opportunities occur. You also want to make sure that you check the procurement site, which is the websites that I mentioned and detailed earlier, so that when those advertisements actually occur, and again, if they're formal, estimated to be over 50,000, they should be posted on the procurement website for 30 days. If they're informal, they're going to be posted in the Enforced Supplier portal for at a minimum 8 hours. County code for informal bid purchases, informal RFBs, RFPs, and RFQs, they have an 8-hour minimum on average. They're posted for a day or two there, so, but they have a quicker turnaround. Again, formal bids, RFPs, and RFQs we'll make all reasonable efforts to post them for 30 days minimum. In addition, once you have a good sorted list of the items that you feel you're interested in your business pursuing, you can also research and prepare to submit bids and proposals or qualifications on items. Generally, the county buys services over a repeat buying those goods over a couple of year window. For instance, the office supply contract. We might award an office supply contract for a 2-year period. So the next time we'll need it is when 2 years from now. So again, you can look at what we previously requested, make a public records request on what we previously requested as part of the RFB, RFP, and RFQ for those services to get an idea of what the county was previously looking for and give you some background information. Again, you must comply with the current specs. So there's no guarantee that the specs will be exactly the same. However, that research can give you some idea of the dollar amount, the length of the contract, and things of that sort that were pertinent the previous time the county purchased those goods and services. And also with the forecast, you can have an idea on when the next opportunity will occur if it's within the next 24-month period. You also might want to determine if you want to, based on the proposed or previous scope of work and the information that you have in the forecast, you would probably want to determine whether or not you would want to partner with someone else for that contract. Again, the forecast information for the July 1st, the one that was posted this July, is available on the Cuyahoga County website at the link indicated above. Again, the quickest way, if you don't want to remember all of the link or refer to that information, is to go to the Cuyahoga County website, do an A to Z search, find a Department of Equity Inclusion. Under the Services tab, there will be options where you can pick the forecast. Then you can download that spreadsheet here. So the current spreadsheet that's available is the one that was posted in July. That detailed the upcoming 24 period starting July 1st. The next forecast will be posted by January 1st. As I mentioned with the small business set aside, the criteria that we use to determine what procurements are good candidates for the SBE set aside program is, first, we want to make sure that there are no funding source restrictions on making it a small business set aside. The county uses a lot of federal, state, and grant funds, and along with receiving and utilizing those funds, there may be requirements that do not allow us to restrict the competition on the procurement to small businesses. In addition, we want to look at the scope of work to make sure that the scope of work proposed for that procurement is typical of the industry and size and scope. We want it to be a simpler or typical complexity, and we want it to have typical standard delivery requirements, and we want it to have typical periods of performance. Again, we want it to be what is reasonably expected for that particular industry, so that when we have small businesses compete against each other, it is an appealing or what is of the general nature for that industry. We also want to make sure that there's a competitive environment. So we want to make sure that there are enough county certified small businesses that provide goods or services in that area so that it can be a competitive environment. And similar to the scope of work, we want to make sure that the performance bonds and insurance requirements are typical or for that industry. When we do make a procurement a small business set aside, the prime vendor must be a county certified SBE. In most cases, county certified SBEs might also qualify to be and be certified as county certified MBEs and or WBEs. Because it is a small business set aside, there will not be an additional SBE goal set for that item. However, depending upon the availability of MBEs, WBEs, based on the scope of work for that item, there may be an MBE goal and or a WBE goal. So again, the small SBE prime, because that's who's only county certified SBE primes are available to submit. So that there's not going to be an additional SBE goal. But if there is a MBE goal or WBE goal, with the example that I'm displaying below, in this example, there's a 10% WBE goal and a 10% MBE goal. So the vendors that submit must be a county certified SBE prime, and then that SBE prime vendor must subcontract to other vendors B, A, and or C, or however many vendors they select to coordinate with that meet the MBE goal, to meet the 10% goal, and or 10%, and they must subcontract if there's a 10%, as it's shown in this example, WBE goal, they must subcontract to additional vendors to meet the WBE goal. Again, there's always the good faith effort documentation if the prime vendor is not able to meet those goals, but they must show concerted, aggressive efforts to subcontract to MBEs and WBEs if there is a MBE and WBE goal for the small business set aside program for that particular procurement. When the county does informal RFPs and RFPs and RFQs, these are procurements, they go through a quicker, shorter procurement process. As I mentioned earlier, by county code, they have to be posted for a minimum of 8 hours. Typically it's 1 to 2 days, and there's a quicker turnaround. The county usually does, if you are familiar with the Board of Control, which is one of the county's contracting authorities, use these items over 5,000 to 50,000 up to $49.99. Those procurements are approved on the Board of Control on what's called the PO/DO list. So there's usually a weekly approval, a quicker turnaround, and because of the smaller dollar amount, there's usually a less of a burden on cash flow because of the quicker turnaround process where you provide the goods and services in a shorter window, and also so you get the payment within a shorter window. So those are appealing to most vendors, and also it should be, we want to increase participation by SBEs and MBEs and WBEs in those procurements. As part of the changes to the SBE, MBE, WBE program is that we are now going to be requiring departments as part of that process to make sure they check the listing of available county certified SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs at least 2 days before they do those procurements. They check the listing to see if there's available SBEs, WBEs, MBEs that can provide those services, so that they can have an email prepared and ready to notify those vendors on the date that the advertisement becomes available. So again, everyone is getting the same timing as far as notification about the opportunity, because those are done in the N4 supplier portal. It's just that SBEs, MBEs, WBEs will also get an email about those opportunities based on the scope of work of the goods and services that the department is providing and what we are aware of is available in vendors that are proposing that provide goods and services in those areas. Also, again, further emphasizing to need to be certified in the N4 supplier portal. Any vendor that's certified, any vendor that's registered in the N4 supplier portal under the NIGP code that matches the NIGP code when the department goes to make the strategic, make the posting, the system, the N4 system, when the department creates the event, that's what it's called in N4, to make the posting of the procurement to start the bidding process. The system looks at the NIGP code of the goods and services that are provided, selected by the department user, and then it looks in its pool of vendors that are registered in the system to determine a list of vendors that have stated, based on their registration, that they provide goods and services in their areas. So that list will include all vendors registered in the supplier portal. And when that is made available, they'll be notified through the N4 supplier portal that opportunity is available. Concurrently, the department will already have checked the county's website, because again, just because a vendor is certified with the county, they may not have went into the supplier portal and registered. So again, it's very important to get registered in the N4 supplier portal, but we're providing another notification to SBEs, WBEs, and MBEs at this concurrently that all vendors get the notification of the opportunity in the N4 supplier portal system. The email that the department is going to send to the vendors that they find on the supplier list or from DEI, if they don't find any on the list based on their keyword search, is that it's going to have the subject line of the email is going to detail that it's regarding a business opportunity with Cuyahoga County. It will provide the event number, and the email should provide a brief description of the goods and services being procured. It should also include the link to the supplier portal system, because again, just because you receive the email, you'll need to provide your bid or response in the N4 supplier portal system. In general, in July, the Office of Department of Equity and Inclusion also started sending just a general email about upcoming opportunities. Again, we're trying to increase awareness so that we can increase participation by county certified SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs. We want to make sure you maximize the opportunities at Cuyahoga County. You've gone through the process of getting certified, which is a lot of paperwork, on-site visits. So we want to make sure that now that you're certified, that you're aware of all of the opportunities with Cuyahoga County. So again, we send a general email, but that just is, we send it to all our email addresses that we have of MBEs, WBEs, and SBEs. And it's just a general listing of what we found in the N4 supplier portal that day. Now, keep in mind, as I provided previously, informal bids have a minimum posting period of 8 hours. So those are procurements, while they have a quick turnaround, they also have a quick period, solicitation and award period. So again, I'm encouraging you, yes, you're going to get the emails as a county certified SBE, MBEs, and WBEs, but I feel you should take advantage to make sure, take more control of your destiny by registering in the supplier portal system. And this is for any vendor, but especially SBEs in general. You went through the process of getting certified. Please register in the supplier portal system so that you can receive the specific notifications that relate to your business's offerings. Again, go to the Cuyahoga County Office of Procurement and Diversity's website. Again, we're in the process. The department was created in May, and that created a Department of Purchasing and a Department of Equity and Inclusion. So we're still in the process of creating our websites and things of that, getting the website separated and up and running. So again, currently the information is available at the Office of Procurement and Diversity. If you want to register, that's on the home page. There's information about the supplier portal registration. There's training guides. There's the link to the actual portal, and there's a video on how to register in the system. When you click to register in the system, the second window pops up and it says anonymous, anonymous. That is the indication that you have not logged in, and or if you're new to the system, that you haven't registered. So you'll need to make sure you proceed with logging in if you've already registered. And obviously if this is your first time, and you will need to register. So again, if you see the window when you click on the N4 supplier portal and it says anonymous, that is not an error. That is the home page, and it's waiting for you to either log in or create a registration. And again, there's videos and training guides available on the Office of Procurement and Diversity's website. Again, the best way to navigate, if you don't want to remember this entire link, is to Cuyahoga County. Go to the Cuyahoga County website, do the A to Z search, look up Procurement and Diversity, and on the home page that I've shown here, you can find the links to that information. So for performal procurements, which are purchases over 50,000 that are going to be procured using an RFB, RFP, or RFQ, request for bids, request for proposals, request for qualifications, the process, instead of the aspirational goals, which were implemented as part of the 2014 study, we are now proceeding with contract by contract diversity goal settings. So the aspirational goals, again, were based on the disparities data from the 2014 disparity study that looked at the county's procurement in the 4 categories: construction, professional services, goods and other services suppliers. Based on the 5-year data that they analyzed of county procurements and the economic market, they felt that data provided that there were the indicated percentages here of minority participation and women, the MBE participation and WBE participation in those categories. And procurements were reviewed funding federal for eligibility for setting an aspirational goal. Based on a 2020 disparity study, which looked at 2014 through 2018 calendar years, our purchasing practice during those 5 years, there was, based on that and the results of the aspirational goals up until that point on our procurement process, as far as increasing diversity and inclusion, diversity and participation by Nbwbs, we're now being recommended and following that recommendation to implement contract by contract goal setting. To do that, you must determine the participation goals, Nbewb, on a contract by contract basis by determining the available MBEs, WBEs using the latest disparity study, which will be using the 2020 disparity study for each scope of work within a procurement. And then you weight that scope of that availability based on the percentage that scope represents within the procurement, overall procurement. So basically it is the formula listed. You sum up the number of MBEs, WBEs overall in that category for that NIGP code by the dollar amount for that proposed scope of work and divided that by the overall scope of work. And that comes up with your overall MBE, WBE goal. And it's similar to what is used for developing the DBE goals. Again, so for our procurement system, we use NIGP codes. So when the county department or agency submits a requisition for a formal procurement that's going to be procured using a bid, RFP, or RFQ, they're going to provide a breakdown of their scope by NIGP code with the dollar amount for that scope. And then DEI will, based on the data in the disparity study, here's the actual form, will calculate the WBE or MBE goal. So again, the department will complete the yellow. They're going to initiate. They're the ones that know the procurement they're going to proceed with. They're going to have their contact information. They're going to provide by NIGP code, for instance, and this is, let's say this is for design of a new office building, example here. They're going to break down the scope. Architect services professional under this NIGP code has, and the estimate for that scope is 100,000. The next category is environmental architecture. In this example, they provide the NIGP code and their estimated dollar amount. And again, if there's so on and so on until they get to the total amount, in this case, 400,000. DEI, based on the disparity study, the tables, information that's provided from the consultant, will provide the availability for MBEs, the availability for WBEs, and based on the weight of those scopes, for the overall cost of 400,000, we will calculate the MBE goal, WB goal. The small business goal is based on general availability and the attractiveness of the component. Again, so in this case, 30 and 11. So again, we want to make sure that the prime vendor does at least 50% of the contract. So again, the SB goal will vary based on the availability overall of MBE, WBE. So a goal will be determined. Again, the NIGP codes are the 5-digit codes that breaks down the goods and services. Based on those codes, the county will make those, user department will provide the information previously shown. That information will be provided in the bidder's manual, which is what you as the vendor will see. The bidder's manual provides the details, the requirements for the SBE, MBE, WB program for that procurement, and it will detail the actual goals for that item. So based on the goal worksheet and the goals that were calculated for MBE was 30%, the WBE goal was calculated at 11%, and a 5% SBE goal was set. That will be detailed on the first page of the bidder's manual for that requisition. So that's what you as the vendor will see. The other forms that I detail were the calculations behind the information that you receive for that procurement. Again, it's similarly to the SBE set aside, small business set aside program. When the prime vendor can submit as the prime for the contract in response to RFB, RFP, and RFQ. As I stated earlier, some prime vendors are going to be county certified SBEs and or MBEs and or WBEs. In general, the prime vendor, if they were an SBE, MBE, or WB, receives a 20% credit toward the diversity goals. However, again, small formal bids and procurements, there are only on average 100 plus or minus RFBs, RFPs, and RFQs issued in one calendar year. Of that 100, there are a certain percentage that we would not be able to set a diversity goal because if it was, for instance, if it's a federal project, they may have a DBE goal on their own. It may be grant programs that might have their own diversity requirements. So again, from that 100, there may be only 75 that we can set a diversity goal. From there, we have to look and determine, are there subcontracting opportunities? Do we have a pool of SBEs, MBE, WB vendors that are available? So that's when we'll do the goal setting. So again, we start with about 100 opportunities. On average, it turns out that there's about 60 to 75 procurements every year that we can set a diversity goal. And for each of those goals, we want to make sure we maximize diversity for those procurements. So if we want to make sure we have SBE participation, MBE participation, and WBE participation. So based on that, we want to make sure that for each procurement, that the maximum credit for the prime is going to be for one category. Similarly, as all the subs, they can only count in one category. So even if an SBE, MBE, WBE vendor has all three certifications, for that bid or procurement, once the tab sheet is analyzed, their participation will be counted only in one category. So for instance, if that doesn't mean they can't exceed the goal, but they're only going to be counted in one category. So for instance, in this case, let's say there's an SB prime, and that the goal for that procurement is 10% SBE, 10% MBE, 10% WBE. Their 20% credit will only count toward the SBE. They're still going to need to subcontract 10% for MBE, 10% WBE. The reason for that is previously that 20% would have wiped out the need to do one of the other categories, but we're trying to maximize competition and maximize participation in all three categories. So while if the goal for the SBE program was 20%, then they would have received the full 20% credit, but they still would have needed some subcontract for MBE 10% and MBE WBE. And that's going to be going forward. Your credit will only count in one category to make sure that the other two categories have some additional participation. Again, I'm going to briefly go through the forms. When you do the participation, we need to document the participation and compliance with the diversity goals by you completing the forms. We need the covenant of non-discrimination completed and signed, must contain original signatures. And I'll give you a visual of the forms. I'm just going over the written requirements. The second form is DIV2. This is the form where the prime, it's a one-page form where the prime completes the top portion and details what portion of the work is being subcontracted to a particular vendor, SBE, MBE, or WBE. That vendor is the SBWB or MBE, and they complete the bottom portion. We need it to be signed by both vendors. It must be for a commercially useful function in the contract for that contract. SBEs, MBEs, WBEs, if you have multiple locations, geographical locations, you must make sure that you detail the geographical location that is eligible for Cuyahoga County certification. Again, remember, SBEs have to have a principal place or a place of business or office in Cuyahoga County. They may have more than one location, but when they submit bids for Cuyahoga for the SBE or complete the SBE, the DIV2 form, they must use the address for Cuyahoga County. Similarly, for MBEs and WBEs, as I mentioned, they must have a geographical location, physical presence in the Cleveland, Elyria, MSA. They might have additional locations, but those are the locations that must be detailed on the DIV2 form. How do you find if you're a prime, non-SBE, MBE, WBE, or if you're a SBE, MBE, WBE, but you want to need to subcontract, so you need to find other SBEs, MBEs, WBEs to meet the goals. Then again, you need to look at the county's website. Under the DEI, we have a website that has a search where you can put in components of the scope of work that you're interested in. For instance, if you're looking for a plumber, HVAC or engineering, to that effect, you put in, you can do a keyword search. If you are familiar with a company, you can put a part of their name so you can see if they pull up, if they're eligible in Cuyahoga County. You might know that they're MBE, but you don't know if they're certified with the county. Again, the search, and I'll show you that in the next forthcoming slide, is where you can go to the county's website and find the current certified SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs. To avoid vendors unknowingly using a vendor SBE, MBE, WBE whose certification is expired, we've started putting this certificate expiration date for those certifications in the search so you can see and make sure that the vendor that you're looking to subcontract with, partner with, still has an active certification. We also recommend that you get a copy of their certificate just to make sure, because that also will detail, like the search, it'll detail the scope of works. Again, the vendor must provide a commercially useful function for this particular contract. So if the contract is for engineering, it needs to be related, the services that your subcontract need to be related to the scope of work that's going to be in that item. Again, how do you meet the goals? Prime contractors should subcontract portions of its contract that are consistent with industry standards. Subcontract through prime utilizes, you can use more than one, excuse me. If a subcontractor is going to sub to another second tier, there's a limit of 25%, and we want to make sure that it doesn't count. We're going to make sure that there's no double counting. That must be detailed in the participation form that I'll go over later. Again, here's the page where you can go website and find a listing. You can do there's drop-down options where you can search by categories such as engineering, marketing. They also have subcategories. Once you pick an overall category, there's options for subcategories under that heading become available. And as I mentioned, there's the keyword search where you can search by the company name, keywords, or service offered. So again, if you were looking for someone to provide plumbing, HVAC, you could put in HVAC, you could put in heating. Again, the whole goal when you do the search is to pull a larger return, and then you can filter based on that who you want to contact from that list. So again, I recommend that you do a more general search and pull up more options to contact than to do something specific like, for instance, architecture. I would put in architect, a root of a word, rather than the particular word, because that may not be in that summary. So you might miss someone that detailed in their summary that they provide architectural services might be missed if you put architecture because of the difference in the ending. So again, I recommend that you put in the root of the word that you're looking for to bring back the biggest return. Again, and as I mentioned before, no SBE, MBE, WBE subcontractor will be permitted to subcontract more than 25% of their subcontract work without prior approval. Again, our goal is to provide opportunities for SBEs, MBEs to get some subcontracting work. We want them to provide the commercially useful function. There's a little higher scrutiny if they're going to get a contract value, but then pass on the majority of that work to another vendor to provide. How do you comply with our SBE, MBE, WBE participation goals? Prime vendor subcontracts with one or more certified SBEs to meet the goal. So again, if that would or exceed the goals, if the goals were 10% SBE, 10% MBE, 10% WBE, your proposal includes subcontract DIV2 forms completed that show that you're going to have SBE, MBE, W participation for each of those categories that meet or exceed the goals. That's one. Or two, maybe you met some of the goals and fell short in some of the other categories. Again, it's for each category, MBE, SBE, WBE. If there was a goal, you have to document your effort to meet each goal. And you fell short, that's partial, but you document with good faith effort that you did aggressive efforts to include SBE, MBE, WBE participation. And finally, it goes with your prime, your SBE, MBE prime, and you document that you received or did concerted good faith effort to get some of the additional MBE, WBB, SBE goals and the other categories, and also or you documented good faith effort to meet those goals, but you fell short. So again, it's not a quota. Our program is not a quota, but you must provide documentation of consistent, aggressive, good faith efforts to meet the goals. So we've done the contract by contract and goal setting means we've done a specific analysis to make sure that the goals are achievable and attainable. However, we know there are various reasons where you may not be able to use a vendor or a vendor may not be available. Again, so it's not a quota, but you must have and demonstrate if you do not meet the goals, concerted, aggressive, good faith effort to meet those goals. And that's for each category. Again, aggressive, good faith efforts to include SBEs, MBEs are required, and it should be in addition to the regular or customary solicitation process. Similar to how we're trying to increase MBE, SBE, WBE participation in informal bids, where in addition to notifying all vendors in our M4 supplier system. For those informal bids, we're doing above that to good faith effort to increase that participation by, in addition, providing an email at the same time to SBEs that we know are certified in those areas that we think are a good match, and also doing the emails each day of opportunities. Similarly, with good faith effort, we're looking for you sent the email at least a week before the due date for the bid, RFP or RFQ. Did you follow up? Did you make contact? Did you provide the information that was required in the outreach to them to let them know these are the goods and services that we're looking for? Again, it has to be aggressive good faith efforts, and it should be in addition to your regular customary solicitation process. And we want it to be documented for each category. Meaning, if there was an SBE goal, MBE goal, WBE goal, and you met, let's say, the MBE goal and fell short on the SBE goal and the WBE goal, your good faith effort documentation, we need documentation that not that you only reached out to MBEs, we need to know which SBEs did you reach out to, which WBEs did you reach out to, what follow-up did you do for all three categories, again, to document how you pursued as the prime participation by MBEs, WBEs, SBEs to meet all of the goals. What are some of the details? You must, as I stated before, you must deliver written or electronic notice to potential SBEs, MBEs, WBEs at least 1 week before the bid or proposal due date. Again, it is not considered sufficient notification to have first reached out to SBEs 2 days before the bid due date. Again, we've expanded the bidding period to 30 days. So there's 30 days. Again, we know that everyone may not get notification or be aware of the opportunity on day one. So that's why we feel that the notification period being longer, 30 days, gives a longer window where you might find out a few days later about the opportunity or somewhere within that window, but also that extended window also provides time for you to do that additional above and beyond aggressive effort to make sure you meet the diversity goals. When you send a written or electronic notice to potential SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs, it must contain the following: sufficient information about the plans and specs and relevant terms and conditions. Also, let them know which information about the work which will be subcontracted or the goods which will be obtained from subcontractors or suppliers. So, for instance, if you're doing a roadway project and you know you're not going to sub the road design, or you're not going to sub the traffic signal design, if that's part of the scope of work, tell them what will be subcontracted that you're looking for. Looking for environmental responses, or I'm looking for maintenance of traffic responses, or I'm looking for whatever the other components of the scope of work that you're looking for proposals from SBEs from. You want to provide the contact person and information that they should respond to make sure that if they have questions, or how did they make sure that they get the response back to the correct person so they can be reasonably evaluated. Also, you want to provide information on your bonding requirements and the deadline for those price proposals. We know there's a bid deadline where you have to submit as the prime the overall bid amount. When do you need to hear back from the SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs on whether or not they're going to participate in what their price proposals are for those items? So again, that information should be in a written response. You only need to complete DIV3, which is the good faith effort certification, if you do not meet one or all of the goals. Again, if you're in a situation previously mentioned, one where you've met or exceeded the goal for each category, then you don't need to complete DIV3. You only need to complete DIV1, which is the covenant of non-discrimination, and your DIV2 should be completed because that's detailing how you're meeting the goals with SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs. So you only need to submit DIV3 if you have not met the SBE participation goal and or the MBE participation goal and or the WBE participation goal. Again, keep in mind, we want all three goals met. So if it was 10% SBE, 10% MBE, 10% WBE, and you have exceeded the SBE goal by 15 and exceeded the MBE goal by 15%, so you got 15 and 15, you still need to, even though you have 30% participation, but you don't have any WBE participation, there was a 10% WBE goal, then you still need to do a DIV3 because you did not meet the diversity goal for the WBE certification. Along with completing the form, the DIV3, which must be signed, it must be notarized, and has with the signature, has to have the date, and it must have detailed information on who you contacted, when you contacted them, and why they're not being used. You must also provide evidence of your good faith effort. That includes the email that you sent, showing the date and time, and make sure that you met the 10-day, the 1 week requirement. The copy of the email provides to make sure that the content of the email was what was required for good faith effort. In the responses, if you went and did send it by registered mail, or if you did advertisements, whatever efforts you did to do above and beyond your customary list solicitations, that you need to provide that information with your bid if you did not meet the goals. So again, here's the covenant of non-discrimination. I'm just going to highlight areas that are that we've seen as being key issues or frequent areas that have been overlooked or caused problems. So first of all, the covenant of non-discrimination, DIV1, it needs an original signature and date. Must be signed and dated. You can complete the top, but if it's not signed, and we also need it signed and dated, must be signed and dated. DIV2, this is the SBE, MBE, WBE subcontractor participation plan. Now in the bidder's manual, these forms are in there. There's sample completed forms in the bidder's manual. The manual that if there's diversity goals, I showed you in a previous slide, the first page of the bidder's manual, which shows the goals for that item. It has the blank forms. It also has these sample completed forms as an example for you to use of what needs to be completed. Again, we need the top portion is completed by the prime vendor. We need to know the scope of work, the estimated dollar amount that the prime vendor is subbing to this contractor listed below. The prime vendor needs to sign and date the top half. The SBE for that particular item needs to complete the bottom half, and it needs to be completed, and it needs to be signed and dated by the subcontractor. This form is very important because it documents a meeting of the minds between the prime vendor and the sub vendor of what scope of work is being subcontracted, and also for what dollar amount. This enables us to understand and make sure that the subcontractor is providing a commercially useful function within this contract. If that prime vendor did not meet the diversity goals, one of the goals, or all of the goals, any range, if there's at least one goal that they have not met, they need to complete the DIV3. What is the DIV3? First, the first page is a 2-page form at a minimum. First page must be completed. You must detail, are you looking for a full waiver, partial waiver, and for what, a summary of your reasoning. We highlighted that you must submit and attach proof. If you're a nonprofit agency, please attach proof. If you deliver written notices to available certified SBEs, WBEs, if you're checking the box, if that's what you did, you need to provide that proof with your bid, with your RFP, with your RFQ. So again, as you check these boxes, you must provide, as indicated, the proof that that effort was done. Again, checking the box is not, it's an indication, but there's no proof by us that you actually did the work. And we need to be able to document your good faith effort to meet all three of the goals. Again, please check each area that's applicable for the efforts that you did to reach the goal, and then provide the subsequent proof of that effort. In addition, DIV3, the second page, is where you detail each vendor that you contacted and why they're not being used. Again, so you're falling short of the goal. We need to have documentation of who you contacted, when you reached out to them, what was offered, or if they offered and you're saying that the price was too high, we're going to need further documentation on what other bids did you receive by what deadline, and what was why was, if you're stating it's too high, you have to provide documentation that their price was too high. In addition, it needs to be signed, dated, and notarized by again of your good faith effort. Based on the information, and this is just background information, so I'm just going to go over this quickly. If you ever request a copy of the tabulation sheet, you'll get this information. So when we receive bids, proposals, RFPs, and RFQs in Cuyahoga County, there's at least there's a review process. The first is reviewed by the Department of Purchasing, the buyer, and that does the administrative review. They look at several different factors, requirements, and determine whether you're compliant. And that includes bid bond. Did you provide the necessary forms, things of that sort. If there's a diversity goal, then there's a diversity program review. So if there's a SBE, MBE, WBE goal, then the SBE the Department of Equity and Inclusion does their review. And then finally, there's the technical review by the department, when they sign off, and then based on the summary of all the requirements and all the 3 reviews as applicable, if there's a diversity review, or if not, it might just be the technical department and the Department of Purchasing. There's a recommendation of who the award eventually, if the county chooses to award. We also complete the top portion based on whether or not it's a bid, if it's based on if the SBE price preference, which I'll discuss later, or if it's CCBB, where they can make a 2% match. If the low bidder is CCBB, is not in the county, then a CCBB that's within 2%, that's compliant on all areas, can match. Similarly, if the low bidder is not a CCBEIP, and there's a CCBEIP vendor within 2% that meets requirements, they can match. Again, so based on the SBE, the DIV2 form, we list the vendors that are on the subcontractor participation form, the DIV2. We determine the overall participation based on the summation of all those vendors listed on the DIV2, and we'll either determine whether or not the vendor complies, and usually we'll check, this is the Department of Equity and Inclusion, we'll determine whether or not this bid or proposal based on the documentation complies, and if not, so it's either yes, they complied, or no, they do not comply. And then also we detail any comments on that item. So in this case, this vendor was deemed to be compliant, that they met the goal. It has my initials and it has my date. It also have the other reviewers in DEI who reviewed it. Similarly, in that same bid, there could be another vendor based on, again, similar review. We look at the SDIV2s, who was listed on each DIV2, what was their proposed participation amount. We do a summation of overall, what are they looking at as far as overall goals based on all the DIV2s that were submitted and or DIV3. And then we make a determination, and then we'll put a comment down also. Similarly, in this case, this vendor was ruled to be non-compliant, and usually if you look at the summary below, you can see what was the reasoning. In this case, the prime vendor C has started the certification process in this case, but did not complete it before the bid due date. So they cannot be counted as an SBE, MBE, or WBE. And their team did not, without their certification being complete, the team that they submitted on SBE, their DIV2 forms, did not meet the goals. So they are not compliant on the bid. And again, this is not anything for you as the vendor to do, but if you ever get a copy of the bid tab or want to know, this is the information that's provided, detailed and summarized to know what happened for each procurement, for each proposal on that bid or proposal or RFQ. With the new process, as I stated, the last vendor on that tab sheet was found to be non-compliant. If the department had determined that that was the vendor that they felt was needed to proceed, that would be what we would consider the apparent successful vendor, but the vendor is not compliant on the MBE WBE participation goals, then they're going to, and that includes SBE, that's the part. They're going to have to obtain, now we determined that they did not have good faith effort. And again, that's why you finish with that example. The department will notify that vendor if they're the apparent successful. If you're non-compliant, but you're not in the running to be the successful vendor, then you'll just be determined, you'll have the information from the tab sheet. However, if you're the department determines that after the Department of Purchasing review and after the Department of Equity review that this is the vendor that's still the best, and they want to, this is the vendor that would have, but for their non-compliance, been the recommended vendor, then they will notify that vendor so that that vendor has the right within 3 days of notification to submit an appeal to an administrative reconsideration panel. They will submit that notice by sending an email to DEI@cuyahogacounty.us. That's our general email address. The appeal is not to us, we're just administering it. The administrative reconsideration panel will be notified of that request. The request for the administrative hearing shall detail the RFB, RFQ title and description. Again, so we know exactly which one. There could be multiple bids that you as a prime submitted. So we need to know specifically which one you're appealing. The type of administrative reconsideration. And again, we're calling it no meeting or meeting. And that's from your perspective, which means that if you pick a no meeting, that means that you're just going to submit your appeal with your summary of why you feel you are compliant. And the panel will still have to meet as a panel and make a determination. It could be virtual or whatever, but they'll meet. But that just means that you don't have to meet. Now, if you want a meeting, you will also detail whether your meeting is going to be virtually or if you want the meeting in person. So that means that you're going to come, you're going to present at the meeting, either virtually or in person, your determination as the appealing, as the vendor appealing the decision. That panel will review that information, and DEI's information, our reasoning behind our determination, and they will make a request. They will make a decision. The panel is in a process of being appointed. This is a new panel. It's by county code that was approved on November 9th. The panel will consist of 3 to 5 county employees appointed by the county executive. There's going to be a quorum. The quorum is majority of the appointed panel and an affirmative vote by the majority of the panel present in order for an action to be required. The goal is that this panel will meet at least twice a month, but they, again, once they're appointed, they will determine their own determine their own schedule, and they will adopt their own rules and procedures consistent with the county code and how they're going to operate. The goal of at least twice a month is just to make sure that we minimize the impact on the timeline for the procurement. Please keep in mind the proposals and bids may be rejected and projects resubmitted for the sole purpose of attaining goals where no good faith effort has been demonstrated. Again, equity, inclusion, especially in general, for the county is very important. We are also very pushing to make sure that we have a diverse pool of vendors that participated in our contracting and purchasing process. So we are, this is very important for us that we partner with vendors that have a similar view on equity and inclusion as it relates to contracting and in our policies, programs, and procedures. So it's very important to us. For RFPs and RFQs, because at that time we do not have as opposed to a bid, RFPs and RFQs, we do not have a formal a final scope of work and or price, because things can be negotiated. Vendors propose a plan based on our scope of work, and then a lot of times terms and conditions and or the final scope have to be negotiated, which means that there could be impacts to the pricing and the scope of work, which could impact the scope of work that was put on plan and ultimately subcontracted to SBEs and MBEs. So what we're requiring is that prior, once the final scope and terms have been final scope of work, price, terms and conditions have been finalized, but in advance of submission of the approval of the contract for approval, that the department will circle back with the Department of Equity and Inclusion to say, hey, here is the final scope of work, the final pricing, and this is what they're proposing for SBE participation. And we'll have to review that to make sure that it agrees with the overall goals for that contract and procurement. In addition, even after the contract is awarded, if the contract is amended for additional dollars or a change of scopes, we still want to make sure the effort will be to make sure that there's still that overall participation by MBEs, WBEs, and SBEs in that contract. Sometimes it's not possible, but we want to make sure that there's the opportunity to make sure that if it's amended for more money, that due consideration and due diligence is given to make sure that we maintain the overall participation goals of SBE, MBEs, and WBEs in that contract. As I mentioned, for bids, there's a price preference. This is basically to make sure that when the lowest bidder is not compliant, then it shows the range for which we will go in the tab sheet to find within the range of proposals that were submitted to determine bidders that are compliant. So for instance, that's called the SBE, MBE, WBE price preference. So if the low bidder's price is, let's say, within the $0 to $500,000 range, just as an example, let's say the bid of the lowest bidder is $400,000. That means that we will go up to 10%. So 10% of 400,000 is 40,000. So if there's a SBE, MBE, WB compliant bidder that is within 440,000 or less of the bidder, that the low bidder at 400,000, so it's between 400,000 and 440,000, we can go to that bidder, that prime bidder, and award to them because that low bidder is not compliant. So that's the calculation that's in the bid tabs. So depending upon the price range of the lowest bid, if that lowest bidder is not compliant, the price preference details the limits for which we will go to a higher bidder to get someone that is compliant on the MBE, WB, and SBE goals. Again, just further detailing our commitment to make sure we have diversity and inclusion of SBEs, MBEs, WBEs in our process. Again, so we've certified, provided opportunities in informal bids and informal bids. Now we want to make sure that we monitor and do post-award reporting. What have been the results? We've gotten vendor certified. We've tried to provide opportunities in formal bids and informal bids for SBE participation. And we want to make sure that vendors are SBEs, MBEs, WBEs, once the contracts award, are actually being able to provide the goods and services that were detailed to be subcontracted to them, and to also make sure that they are getting their payment, being sufficiently paid for those goods and services. So the Department of Equity and Inclusion, DEI, is authorized to collect from all participants data and information as is necessary to monitor this program. We want to monitor the utilization of SBEs, MBEs in a manner that is proportionate to the established goals. So we want to make sure that once the contracts are awarded, what was the actual participation? We will provide written reports on an annual basis. Now the county does the annual equity report. As part of the equity report, the Department of Equity and Inclusion, which is also the Director of Equity and Inclusion, is part of the county's internal equity commission, and that commission puts out the annual equity report. One of the components that must be detailed is our equity and inclusion initiatives and results as it relates to contracting and purchasing. So that's where we provide details on SBEs, MBEs, and WBE certified, what contracts have been awarded, what dollar. Our goals provide information on the participation in awards and also an actual final participation in actually amounts paid to SBEs and MBEs for goods and services provided on county contracts. But we need that information not only from the departments, but we also need that information from the vendors. One of the systems that we use is B2G Now. When a contract is awarded by Cuyahoga County with diversity goals, that system is used by more than just DEI. It's also used by Public Works and also development for their initiatives also. But when a contract is awarded with diversity goals for SBE, MBE, WBE program, we notify the prime and also the sub SBEs, MBEs, and WBs of the contract award and what our anticipated goal is based on the tabulation sheets, which I just went over an example. And we also start monitoring those payments from the prime to those SBEs, MBEs, WBs in our B2G software system that we use now to track those payments. We also want to make sure, again, as I stated, the county does a disparity study every 5 years. That's by county code requirement. And that as part of that study, we go through a hiring process to select a third-party consultant that will analyze our purchasing. So they look at the data from our awards, contracts, and payments to determine Nbwb participation. They do a analysis of the market. And so we need that information on not only the subcontractors that we use for diversity goals and for our SBE, MBE, WBE goals, but we also need to know, even for contracts that do not have a diversity goal, what is our subcontracting pattern? So if we were not setting diversity goals, or in those instances where federal funds or grant funds, or there were other factors where we could not implement our diversity program, what was the subcontracting pattern? What was the demographics of the subcontractors used on those contracts that were counties, those county contracts? So we're looking to see in all of our contracting, the contracts that we had goals and the contracts that we did not have goals, what is our utilization and payments to SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs? So we are collecting that information also. Again, we use for SBE, MBE, WBE program, we use the B2G Now program. And what we're going to do for the contracts that do not have MBE, WBE goals is that we're going to use a subcontractor's utilization form. In general, when that contract with SBE, WBE participation is active, we need to be able, we are still monitoring those contracts. So SBEs, MBEs, WBEs that were initially committed in the contract award, you cannot, prime vendors cannot make substitutions or replacements without approval by DEI. If there are SBEs, MBEs, or WBEs that are terminated or they failed to provide their service, again, you must have DEI involved and you must make due diligence effort to replace those MBEs, WBEs with other MBEs, WBEs. Again, our goal is to make sure that we not only set a goal, that we award based on those goals, and that we document and make sure with due diligence that we have participation that's consistent with the goals and the awarded goals throughout the contract. So the substitutions, replacements must be approved by DEI. We need a quick turnaround. So we do not, obviously we know, for instance, if this contract construction. We need to keep the process going. So we'll do our effort to make a quick turnaround review, but we need quick turnaround information from you, the prime vendor, on what the changes are going to be and what your new commitments. We use, if you need to substitute or replace a subcontractor and you contact DEI, when you go to find the replacements based after contacting DI or documenting that you're going to get a replacement, you need to complete that DIV2. Again, we need to document there's a meeting of the minds between the prime and the new SBE, MBE, or WBE that's going to be used. So you'll need to use that form again and complete it based on the new agreement between yourself as the prime and the SBE or MBE that you're going to use. Similarly, if SBE or MBE has to be terminated or details that they're not going to be able to fulfill the contract for whatever reasons, when you find a new replacement for that SBE, MBE, that new SBE, MBE, or WBE commitment needs to be documented in that DIV2. Again, we hope we never get to, obviously, if you met the goals in the award, we have expectations that you will continue to show that same due diligence to make sure. However, if that does not occur, there is the opportunity for the county to take action to make sure that if there isn't compliance on or due diligence, then we can make a recommendation to terminate. But again, that's something we feel that that's something we try to avoid. We feel that we're working with vendors, and then based on the getting to this point, our understanding is that there should be a common goal and intent to meet the diversity goals. So we're optimistic and have high expectations of the commitment to diversity and inclusion, not only by us, but also by you as a vendor. As I stated, finally, for all contracts, we want to have documentation on what is the demographics of our subcontracting and our participation by SBEs and MBEs and WBEs in our procurement process. So what we're now going to be implementing is a contractor closeout activity report. So for every contract, whether there's a goal or not, there's a closeout summary form where, as part of that final payment for that contract, the prime vendor must provide details in let me go to the next form, show you the form. In our contractor's closeout activity report, in this report, you, as the prime, you would just detail the total amount for the contract and all the subs used by you as the prime to fulfill the requirements of the contract, provide the goods and services for the contract. We need you to provide not only the details about the overall contract, as the prime, your information, your contact information, what was the actual contract number, what was the description of the services, what was the final contract amount. And then we need you in the body of the form to detail, this is an Excel spreadsheet, each vendor used, address for the vendor that was used, the tax information for that vendor, contact information, and if there's proclaiming to be SBE, MBE, WB, indicate that information. And also when you provide the summary of the scope of work that was sub to that vendor, provide the ownership of that vendor. For instance, in the example here, there were 4 subcontractors used. The first subcontractor was this, indicates that they are a small business. The ownership for that company is a white male, and the services that were subcontracted were maintenance of traffic. The next vendor is self-proclaiming to be a WBE. And again, the reason I'm mentioning that is that you're providing the information that you have. We understand that you as the prime are not a certification company, but if the vendor provides that information, when we collect this information, it'll be collected in our records and used as part of the next disparity study to show all of our subcontracting patterns for items. The third party that's selected for the disparity study to do the period where this data is relevant will also have additional information where they can match based on contract numbers, whether or not there was a goal and how we felt that the translate. So in here, we're not asking you to verify any of the categories as far as if they're a SBE, MBE, or WB, but you want to ask them to let you know what's the makeup, the demographics of their ownership, and you as the prime will know what scope of work you sub to them and also the dollar amount. So this information will be provided at the last payment. At the end is not provided on the monthly. In this case, there's a contract closeout for every contract. If you had a SBE, MBE, WB, then you would have already been providing monthly information in the B2G Now system. However, this is for any contract. At the end, with the last payment, they need to submit this information so that we have this record, so that when we make that investment to do the next disparity study, they can have a better understanding on how we have been subcontracting in general, or what has been the utilization of SBEs, MBEs, and WBs in general with our contracting process. In addition to the administrative reconsideration panel, which is only for the apparent successful vendor who was non-compliant and on a good faith effort, we have the grievance hearing board. The grievance hearing board is an existing board that has been in place for years. This board is empowered to hear all grievances concerning certification, decertification, gold complaints, good faith, or any other grievances called by the provisions of this program, our program, which is SBE, MBE, WBE. What was changed with the code, with the approval on November 9th, is that there's always been a 5-member board. Previously, the 3 appointees by the county executive were specific job descriptions for specific positions with titles, specific titles in the org chart under the county executive. The 2 county council members have always been appointments by the president of council. It has not been related to any district or any committee. It's just 2 appointments by county council. Similarly, the change is to make the 3 appointments by the county executive to be 3 individuals, employees that the county executive wants to appoint. It doesn't have to be a specific department or a specific title. It's 3 appointments made by the county executive. So again, the size of the board has stayed the same. The apportionment between the executive side and the county council side has stayed the same. 2 county council, 3 appointments by the county executive. The change is just that the county executive now has more flexibility. It's not tied to specific positions. The benefit of that is that first, if the structure under the county executive changes, then we don't have to worry about going back to the county code ordinance and code to change the titles. Also, if the appointees remains, but they go into different positions, but you want to maintain the learning curve of their history, their knowledge base, they can remain on the board at the county executive's, even in another position under his authority, they can remain on the board so we don't lose that knowledge. And there's consistency. The quorum of this board is 4, and the formal vote of 3 is required for any action. Again, it's a public board, so they must meet state of Ohio laws related to Open Meetings Act. And again, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do the administrative reconsideration panel, because we wanted to limit if it's just a reconsideration of good faith effort, we didn't want to have to have enact public record open meeting requirements. We want it to be as informal but still clear and appealable to the process so it could move along. So that's the purpose of the administrative reconsideration panel, was to give a quicker feedback on whether or not DEI's determination of good faith effort in that limited area was needed to be reconsidered, but all matters can still go to the grievance hearing board, which is a formal body which has 20 days to try an effort to get a meeting to consider any matters before them. Again, I'm just going to quickly go through these, that the county has the right to, with this process, if there's non-compliance, to do sanctions and penalties. They can do a determination of non-responsiveness. They can provide limited suspension. There could be a rejection of future proposals. If it was determined that there was a violation, again, they can withhold payments. The contract can be canceled, and or if it rises to that, it can be a permanent disbarment. Again, authority and power for imposing of sanctions and penalties shall lie with the county authorities and elected and appointed officials, that as detailed in the county charter, county ordinances, state laws, and federal laws. However, that recommendation can come from the grievance hearing boards, which we just briefly went over, or Department of Equity and Inclusion. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of details here because we don't expect that. We expect to be partners and include in increasing participation of small businesses, women businesses, and minority business in our procurement process. And we hope that we never have to be very familiar with sanctions and penalties. But in general, they can be recommended for if there's evidence of a specific conduct on the part of the participant that is inconsistent with or in direct opposition to the applicable provisions of this program. The severity of the sanctions will take into consideration a lot of different factors, number of the incidents, whether the participant was previously suspended, so history, whether the participant has failed or refused to provide information. So again, we're looking, the severity is based on the details of that particular participant and issue and history. And again, we're just, it is unlawful for any person to knowingly and willfully and with intent to mislead or to make any false or fraudulent representations to Cuyahoga County. Again, I've been going over an hour and a half. I appreciate you staying tuned, and now pretty much can open it up for questions and answers. Again, thank you for spending time with us today, and I'm here to answer any questions. The webinar is available on YouTube. It's being streamed live now, and then it will be available for YouTube afterwards. So Adam, do we have any questions?
There are no questions at this time that have been submitted.
Okay, we'll give it another minute. Again, use the Q&A function if there are any questions that you have regarding the program. I know we presented a lot of information. All the details that were presented today are available in further detail in the county code. These ordinances, again, were approved on the updates to the programs, the SBE program, MBE program, and WBE program were approved by county code on November 9th. As such, they will be available on the Cuyahoga County County Council section under the county code, where you can get the further detail. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to send an email to DEI at dei@cuyahogacounty.us. Also, you can call us with any information. That's 216-443-7230. Again, that's 216-443-7230. We'll hold for, again, another 2 to 3 minutes. It's 10:40 now, maybe to 10:45, to provide an opportunity if there are any questions that come up within that time period. So we'll just hold it here in case there are any questions that come up through the Q&A. Okay. And again, just repeating, any questions, please send them through the Q&A, and Adam will state them so that all parties can hear the question, and then I'll respond with that information. Again, I just want to, while we're waiting to see if there's any questions, repeat a couple of items. Please make sure that you get registered in the N4 supplier portal system. I know that getting registered, getting another password is just another layer, but it's very important. The N4 suppliers portal system is one of the modules that was part of the major ERP system that Cuyahoga County implemented, and we still have a few more modules to implement. Our supplier portal system is where we do all of our informal bids, RFPs and RFQs, and also our formal procurements are in there also. So again, that's where you can register as a supplier. You'll go in as a company, you will indicate your primary contacts and alternate contacts. You'll select the NIGP codes that match your goods and services. I recommend that when you select your NIGP codes, that you select even the ones that are maybe. So there might be some that based on a category and summary, you are clear that they match the goods and services you provide. I would take the time, I recommend that you take the time to look for all categories and select those that are close, maybe, because it's better to, the reason I say that is because the way the system works is when a department user goes in to create an event is the terminology that's used by the strategic sourcing, which is the actual bidding component of the N4 system. When the event is created, part of the information that the user puts in is not only the date and times that the item will be posted, they enter the information based on this by selecting NIGP codes for the scope of work or services or goods and services that are going to be procured that we're looking for a response from vendors on. So when they put in those NIGP codes, there's a part in the system that's part of creating that event that says notify suppliers. So when they hit that component, activate that component, it searches the supplier portal system for all the vendors that have registered under that commodity code, under that NIGP code. And then it pulls back that list of vendors and says, these are the vendors that match in their registration, that have commodity codes that match the NIGP codes that you have on this event. So when that item is activated and ready to be posted, when it's time for that to be posted, advertised, as we say, those are the vendors that will be notified. So it is better to have a broader list of vendors to be notified and you be on that list and you can say no than to not be notified because it picked NIGP code 5001, which you were kind of sure, but you didn't pick because you weren't for sure or certain, and you missed that opportunity. So it's better to start off with a wider registration of list of NIGP codes, because you can always go back in if you realize that what you're getting notified, the opportunities that you're being notified are not what's consistent with what the goods and services that you offer, then you can go in and register, modify that. So I would definitely make sure that you go in and register. Looks like we have a question. Is there a question?
It's a statement just thanking you for the information and just stating that you did a great job.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Thank you. So again, it is 10:45. If there are no questions, again, please keep in mind that this was streamed live, so it'll be available on YouTube. I know we provided a lot of information. That's one of the reasons why we work to have it on YouTube, so that you can go back and review the video, pause it, take down any additional information, and that was provided at that point. Again, if you have specific questions, please email us at DEI@cuyahogacounty.us or give us a call at 443-7230. And again, I appreciate everyone that tuned in and listened for over an hour and a half as we presented this information. We're excited about the opportunities, but it takes participation by all of us to make sure we increase MBE, WBE, and SBE participation in Cuyahoga County